It was an overcast Tuesday afternoon, and everything seemed washed in shades of gray. The clouds hung low in the sky, thick and heavy, as if the heavens themselves were mourning. I had just finished my shift at the local bookstore. My feet ached from standing for hours, my back sore from carrying heavy boxes of stock, and my mind weary from the constant hum of customers, the noise of the world, and the weight of my own thoughts. I longed for quiet, a moment of peace, but there never seemed to be enough time for it. The rain began to fall as I stepped out of the store, the droplets tapping lightly on the pavement, the world around me blurring as the grayness deepened. I adjusted the straps of my worn backpack and made my way to the parking lot, my thoughts still tangled in a haze of exhaustion and longing. My old car, a beat-up hatchback, sputtered and groaned as I turned the ignition. I tried to ignore the familiar rattle, but it was impossible. I had learned to live with the noise, the quirks of the car that had been with me for years, just as I had learned to live with the quiet ache in my chest that never seemed to fade. The loss of my mother, Eleanor, 2 years ago had left a void in my life, a hole that I couldn't quite fill. I had never expected her death to hit so hard, but it did. Everything felt different without her, distant, colder, emptier. I had been her only child, and after her passing, there had been an overwhelming sense of solitude that I couldn't shake. I had tried to keep going, of course. Emma, my daughter, kept me grounded, but even her bright smile couldn't erase the grief that lingered. I worked tirelessly to make ends meet, juggling my shifts at the bookstore, trying to make enough to cover the rent and bills, while still managing to be the mother Emma needed. It wasn't easy. It never had been. But after Mom was gone, it felt as if I was carrying everything on my own. The drive home was slower than usual, the rain falling harder now, blurring the streets ahead of me. My car's wipers swished back and forth, keeping pace with the storm. I was lost in thought, thinking of bills piling up, of Emma's ever-expanding toy collection that seemed to grow faster than my income, when I reached a red light. I slowed, tapping my fingers nervously on the steering wheel. My eyes drifted to the side of the street, where a lone figure stood in the pouring rain, her umbrella turned inside out, struggling to hold onto her groceries with one hand. She was elderly, probably in her late 60s or early 70s, her gray hair matted against her weathered face, her clothes drenched from head to toe. She looked frail, a stark contrast to the sheer determination written in the lines of her face. For a moment, I debated keeping my eyes forward and driving on. I was already running late, and my car was in no condition to make any more detours. I barely had enough money for gas, let alone a generous gesture. But something made me stop. It wasn't just her weathered face or the sight of her struggling with the weight of her bags. It was something else. I saw my mother in her, the way Eleanor had carried herself, always with quiet dignity, no matter the struggles life threw her way. I sighed, my conscience weighing heavily on me. I was tired, frustrated, and running on empty, but this woman needed help, and I couldn't just drive away. I rolled down the passenger window and called out, "Ma'am, you shouldn't be out here like this. Let me give you a ride." She looked up at me, her eyes weary but grateful, and after a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "Well, I suppose if you don't mind, I'd appreciate the help." I smiled, feeling the weight of the decision lifting just a little, and swung the door open for her. "It's no trouble at all," I said, though I was already mentally calculating the gas I'd lose on the detour. But that didn't matter. I helped her into the passenger seat, ignoring the clutter of fast food wrappers and half-empty coffee cups. She didn't seem to mind. As I drove her to her apartment, she introduced herself as Marjorie, and we started talking. She asked about Emma, about how I was holding up, and for the first time in a while, I found myself opening up. I told her about the struggles of life after my mother's death, the feeling of being lost, of having no one to turn to. She listened intently, offering little more than a nod and the occasional word of encouragement, but her presence was a comfort I hadn't expected. When we finally reached her building, I insisted on carrying her bags up to her apartment. She thanked me again, her voice soft but filled with sincerity. "Your mother would be proud of you," she said. The words hit me like a wave. I hadn't heard her name spoken in so long, and hearing it from this stranger made my chest tighten. I paused, a lump forming in my throat. "You knew my mom?" I asked, my voice betraying my surprise. Marjorie smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. Oh, yes. Eleanor was one of the brightest women I've ever known. We were very close. I felt a rush of emotion, curiosity, grief, and an aching need to understand. I had never imagined that my mother had close friends like Marjorie, and the thought of her sharing her life with someone else made me feel both comforted and lonely all at once. After she thanked me once more and disappeared into her apartment, I returned to my car, but my mind was buzzing. I didn't realize that Marjorie's presence in my life was only just beginning. I thought nothing more of it that night. Despite the curiosity gnawing at me, I was exhausted, and the day had been long enough. I dropped Emma off at home, fed her a quick dinner, and tucked her into bed. My own night was quiet, save for the thoughts swirling in my mind. There was something about Marjorie, something about the way she spoke of my mother, that felt different from anything I'd experienced in the last 2 years. It was as though the connection between my mother and her was a thread I hadn't noticed before, one that had been there all along, just out of reach. It wasn't until the next morning that I truly realized what I had forgotten. I had left the purse Marjorie had left behind on the passenger seat of my car. I hadn't even thought to check it the night before, but now it seemed that the purse itself might hold answers I didn't even know I was seeking. My curiosity finally got the best of me, and I grabbed the purse before heading out to work. The soft leather of the bag felt oddly heavy in my hands, as though it contained far more than what its simple appearance suggested. I slid into the driver's seat, my hands trembling slightly as I unclasped the purse. At first glance, it appeared mostly empty. There was no wallet, no phone, no identification. Just an old-fashioned brass key, the kind you'd see on a heavy wooden door, and a sealed envelope. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the envelope. It was unmistakable. It was my mother's handwriting. The elegant loops of her script, the familiar curve of her letters, made my stomach twist. My mother had passed away over 2 years ago, and yet here was something she had written to me. A letter that I knew would explain everything, or nothing at all. I held my breath as I broke the wax seal, my fingers shaking slightly as I carefully unfolded the paper. As I began to read, my heart started to race. My dearest Lucy, if you are reading this, then I am no longer with you. I know this letter will come as a surprise, but please trust me when I say that everything I've done out of love for you and your future. I know you are struggling right now, carrying more than your fair share. I also know that your uncle, Roger, will tell you that the house had to be sold to pay off debts. This is not true. Roger has his own interests at heart, and he's been hiding the truth from you. My home, your inheritance, was never meant to leave the family. I have given the house to you, but I couldn't just give it to you without making sure you are ready for it. So I've left the key with someone who has known you since you were a little girl, someone I trust completely, Marjorie. She is a loyal friend, and she will test you, not out of cruelty, but out of love. If she finds you worthy, she will deliver this letter to you and show you the way to reclaim what is rightfully yours. I love you always, Mom. I read the letter over and over, my mind trying to process what I had just learned. My mother had never mentioned anything about leaving me the house. In fact, she had always said that there were no debts, that everything was taken care of. But here it was, the truth, hidden from me, just as my mother had predicted. Roger, my uncle, had lied. He had sold the house, claiming there were debts to pay, when in reality, it had always been meant for me. The house where I had spent so many summers as a child, the house that had been my sanctuary when the world outside felt too heavy, was mine. It had always been mine, and I had no idea. I felt a mixture of emotions: shock, disbelief, anger, and a quiet sense of betrayal. How could Roger do this? How could he hide the truth from me, knowing what the house meant? But it wasn't just about the house. It was about the love and protection my mother had given me, even after she was gone. She had trusted Marjorie, her old friend, to ensure that I was ready to take back what was rightfully mine. The key, the brass key, felt heavier now, more significant. It wasn't just a key to a house. It was a key to my mother's love, a key to the past I thought I had lost forever. I was holding in my hand a piece of my history, a part of her legacy that she had safeguarded for me. Without wasting another second, I started the car and drove straight to the house. I knew what I had to do. There was no more waiting. I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. I had to confront what had been stolen from me and take it back. As I pulled up to the familiar street, my breath caught in my throat. The house stood there, just as I remembered it. The ivy crawling up the brick, the overgrown roses spilling over the garden fence, the porch swing that always creaked when the wind blew. It was everything I had loved, everything I had lost. I parked across the street, my hands trembling as I stepped out of the car. For a moment, I just stood there, taking it all in. The house that I thought I would never see again was within my reach. I took a deep breath and walked up the stone path. The brass key felt cool against my palm as I slid it into the lock. The door opened with a satisfying click, and I stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of dust, but it was also familiar, the scent of lavender and old books. My mother's scent. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the memories wash over me. And then I picked up the phone. My Uncle Roger was going to hear the truth. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. I stood there in the foyer, the door still open behind me, letting in the soft rain that continued to tap against the windows. The scent of my mother lingered in the air, mingling with the mustiness that comes with an abandoned home. The walls seemed to whisper memories of summers spent running through the garden, of laughter echoing in the kitchen as she baked, of moments when I had felt safe, truly safe. The house had always been my sanctuary, the place I had returned to whenever life became too overwhelming. And yet, now, it felt more like a ghost than a home. I walked slowly through the rooms, each step deliberate, as if I feared disturbing the quiet. I ran my hand along the wooden banister, touched the corner of the couch my mother used to sit on, and paused in the kitchen, where the old clock on the wall ticked away the seconds like it always had. Everything was just as I remembered, but at the same time, everything was different. My mother was gone. I was here alone now. I moved upstairs, my heart pounding with every step. The hallway was bathed in the soft light of the overcast day, the shadows long and quiet. I reached my mother's room, her door slightly ajar. I pushed it open, and there she was, or at least the memory of her. The room was just as it had been. Her books stacked neatly beside the bed, the old rocking chair by the window, the curtains swaying slightly in the breeze. It was as if she had never left. But she had, and I was left here to navigate the aftermath of her absence. I walked over to the desk, her handwriting still visible on scraps of paper, half-finished notes and reminders she had scribbled down in the margins of her life. As I sifted through the papers, my fingers brushing against the edges, something caught my eye. A small, leather-bound journal tucked behind a pile of old letters. I opened it, my heart racing with the anticipation of what I might find inside. It was her journal, a place where she had written her thoughts, her reflections, her feelings. The pages were yellowed with age, but the ink was still legible, still vibrant. I flipped through the pages, reading bits and pieces of her words. There were entries about her childhood, about life, and most poignantly, about me. She had written about her hopes and dreams for me, about how much she wanted to protect me from the world, how much she loved me. My throat tightened as I read her words, the love she had for me spilling off the page. It was clear that she had always wanted what was best for me, even when she was no longer around to guide me. I sat on the edge of her bed, the journal still in my hands, and let the tears fall. They came quietly at first, a few drops that landed on the pages, but then the floodgates opened, and I cried. I cried for everything I had lost, for the woman who had raised me, for the house that now felt like a hollow shell of what it used to be. I cried for the years that had passed without her, for the absence that had left me feeling unmoored. But as the tears came, I also felt something else, something deeper, something that I had been too afraid to admit. I felt a sense of peace, of connection, as if my mother were still here, still with me in some way. I wiped my eyes, took a deep breath, and stood up. I had come here to reclaim what was mine, to take back the house that had been stolen from me. But it wasn't just about the house. It was about everything my mother had left behind, the love, the lessons, the memories. It was about honoring her legacy, her life, and the woman she had been. I wasn't alone anymore. I had everything I needed to move forward. I picked up the phone again, my fingers steady now. I had to call him Roger, my uncle, the man who had lied to me, who had stolen my inheritance, the man who had taken away my mother's house without a second thought. He answered on the second ring, his voice cool and detached as always. "Lucy, what is it now? I told you, the house was sold. There's nothing left for you." I couldn't help but let a cold smile tug at the corners of my lips. "Funny you should say that, Roger," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I'm standing in the house right now, and it's in perfect condition. Funny for something that was supposedly sold a year ago." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, followed by a sharp intake of breath. "What are you talking about?" he sputtered, clearly flustered. "How did you get in there?" "Simple," I said, my voice steady now, stronger than I had ever sounded. "I used the key, a key that was given to me by the rightful owner of the house, my mother." I could almost hear him scrambling on the other end of the line, trying to come up with some excuse. "You're breaking and entering," he shouted. "No," I replied, my voice unwavering. "I'm just reclaiming what's mine. And you, Roger, have a lot of explaining to do." I hung up the phone, the sound of the click echoing in the silence of the house. A weight seemed to lift from my chest, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Empowered. This house, this legacy, was mine, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. I walked back downstairs, looking around one last time. This house was more than just a building. It was a part of me, a part of my mother that I would carry with me for the rest of my life. I wasn't just reclaiming a home. I was reclaiming my history, my future, and my peace. And with that, I knew I was finally ready to move forward. The days that followed felt like a strange, surreal dream. I had driven to the house with the intention of confronting the lies, but it turned out that I was confronting something deeper, my past, my grief, and the very essence of who I was. The house was no longer just a structure made of wood and brick. It was a living, breathing thing that held memories of my mother, of my childhood, of everything I had once believed was lost. And now it was mine again. But as much as I wanted to settle in and let the comfort of familiarity wash over me, I knew the journey wasn't over yet. There were still questions that needed answers, still unfinished business with my Uncle Roger. I had taken back the house, but I still needed to take back my peace of mind. I woke up early the next morning, the soft light of dawn filtering through the curtains, casting a warm glow on the room. The smell of the house, the lavender, the faint traces of wood polish, and something else I couldn't quite name, was calming. It was as if the house had been waiting for me to come back. Emma was still asleep in the room next door, her soft breathing filling the quiet. I stood there for a moment, just breathing it all in, before I decided to get some fresh air. The garden outside was wild, overgrown with roses, ivy, and the remnants of plants my mother had once lovingly tended to. I walked out into the garden, my feet sinking slightly into the damp earth. The rain had stopped, and the sky was now a pale blue, with clouds slowly drifting away. The roses, though untended, still held a certain beauty. My mother's roses. I bent down to touch one of the petals, so soft and delicate, and for a moment, I let myself remember the times when I was a child, when I'd spent hours with her in this very garden, watching her tend to the flowers with such care. She had always said that the roses needed attention, patience, and love, and they would thrive. And here they were, still standing, despite everything that had happened. I felt a lump form in my throat, and I wiped away a stray tear before it could fall. I hadn't realized how much I had missed this place, this home. It wasn't just the house I had missed. It was the love, the warmth, and the safety that had come with it. I had forgotten, over the years of struggle and loss, how much this house had meant to me. And now, it was all mine again. But it wasn't just a matter of possession. It was about what I could build here. I could make this home again, not just for me, but for Emma too. I spent the rest of the morning unpacking boxes, moving old furniture into place, and cleaning away the dust that had accumulated over the years. There was something satisfying about putting things back where they belonged, about reconnecting with the past while also creating space for the future. I couldn't help but smile as I dusted off the shelves, finding old photographs of my mother and me, snapshots of moments that had once seemed insignificant but now felt like treasures. I placed them carefully on the mantel, side by side, next to a picture of Emma. By the time the afternoon rolled around, I had made a dent in the clutter, and the house was starting to feel like home again. But there was still the matter of Roger. I had known the confrontation was coming, but even so, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease in the pit of my stomach. I had made my peace with the house, with my mother's memory, but I needed to make my peace with the betrayal. I picked up the phone and dialed Roger's number. It rang once, then twice. He answered on the third ring, his voice still as cold and calculating as it had been the night before. "Lucy, what now?" he said, his tone dismissive. "I thought we were done with this. I told you the house was sold. There's nothing left for you." I inhaled deeply, steadying my voice. "Roger, I'm not asking anymore. I'm telling you. The house is mine. It was never sold. You lied. And now you're going to answer for it." I could hear him on the other end of the line, his breath hitching slightly. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. "How did you get in there?" "It's simple," I said, my voice calm but unwavering. "I used the key that my mother left for me, and I'm not going to let you destroy her legacy. The house isn't yours to sell, and it wasn't yours to take. You're going to make this right, Roger. You're going to do what's right." There was a long pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was a mix of frustration and disbelief. "You're just going to let this go, aren't you? You don't understand what you're doing." "No, Roger," I said, the words coming more easily now. "I understand perfectly. You made a choice, and now it's time to face the consequences of that choice." I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of finality settle over me. The storm with Roger was far from over, but I knew now that I could handle it. This house was more than just bricks and mortar. It was my foundation. And with that, I finally felt like I was standing on solid ground again. I walked back to the garden, the sun beginning to break through the clouds, casting a golden light over the roses. I smiled to myself, knowing that I had everything I needed to move forward. This house was my home, and nothing, not even Roger, could take that away from me. It had been a week since my confrontation with Roger. The air in the house felt different now, as if the weight of everything that had happened was finally starting to lift. The house was settling back into itself, the rooms growing warmer with every passing day. Emma and I had started a new routine, one that felt like a step forward rather than a reminder of everything we'd lost. She seemed to thrive in the familiar space, her laughter echoing through the halls as she rediscovered her favorite toys in the attic. She'd found a collection of old picture books that had once been mine, and each night she would bring them to me, asking me to read the same stories my mother had read to me years ago. It was comforting to think that, in some way, my mother's spirit lived on in these small, everyday moments. I had learned to fill the silence with work, moving boxes, organizing the kitchen, planting new flowers in the garden. The roses my mother had once carefully tended were still there, though wild and untamed, as if they had been waiting for someone to come back and care for them. Each time I walked through the garden, I felt her presence. It was as if she were still watching over me, gently guiding me with her quiet strength. The house, too, had taken on a life of its own. It no longer felt like a ghost of the past, but a living, breathing space full of potential and memories. I had found a new sense of purpose in making it my own again. But as much as I was finding peace in the house, the storm with Roger was still brewing. I hadn't heard from him since our last conversation, and I had no idea what he was planning. Part of me hoped that he'd come to his senses, maybe apologize and walk away. But I knew better. Roger didn't care about the truth or what was right. He cared about power, control, and money. I had seen that side of him before, but now it felt more personal, more dangerous. I wasn't just his niece anymore. I was a threat to his plans, to everything he thought he could take from me. I was sitting in the living room one afternoon, sorting through some old paperwork, when the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but my gut told me it was him. I hesitated for only a moment before answering. "Lucy," Roger's voice came through, flat and strained. "We need to talk." I felt a mixture of anger and resignation flood through me. "Talk about what, Roger?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's nothing left to talk about. The house is mine, and you can't change that." I know, he said, his voice sharp now. But I made a mistake. I shouldn't have tried to sell it behind your back. I didn't know what else to do. I could feel my blood boiling. The audacity of him, acting like he was the victim, made my skin crawl. No, Roger, you didn't make a mistake. You lied. You stole from me, and you thought you could get away with it. This isn't just about the house. This is about the truth, and you've been hiding it for far too long. He sighed, the sound full of impatience. Look, I'm not trying to fight. He paused, and I could hear him struggling to find the right words. I didn't want you to have the house. I thought you'd sell it, waste it, or whatever. It wasn't about you. It was about everything else. But now I see it's different, and I'm asking for a chance to make things right. I wasn't sure what shocked me more, the fact that he was admitting to his wrongdoing, or the fact that I could hear regret in his voice. It didn't feel genuine, though. It felt like another manipulation, another play for sympathy. I'm not interested in your apology, I said, my voice tight with emotion. You don't get to take everything from me, Roger, and then expect me to just forgive you. This house, this life, it's mine, and it always has been. He was quiet for a moment, and I thought he might hang up, but then he spoke again, his tone lower. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I want to be a part of your life again, Lucy. I want to fix things. I know it won't be easy, but I want to try. I felt a pang of something deep inside me. There was a time when I would have wanted nothing more than to have a relationship with Roger. But that was before I knew the depth of his lies, before I realized how far he would go to get what he wanted. Trust, once broken, couldn't be easily repaired. I'm not sure I can ever trust you again, Roger, I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. Not after what you did. You've hurt me, and you've hurt this family. It's going to take more than words to fix that. I waited for his response, but when it came, it was barely audible. I understand, he muttered before hanging up. I sat there for a moment, the phone still in my hand, the weight of our conversation pressing down on me. The storm with Roger wasn't over. It had only just begun. But I wasn't the same person who had walked into this house a week ago. I had reclaimed my past, my future, and my strength. And no matter what Roger tried, he couldn't take that from me. The next morning, I stood at the window, looking out over the garden. The roses were in full bloom now, vibrant and strong, just like the life I was beginning to rebuild. Emma ran past me, her laughter filling the house as she chased after a butterfly. I smiled, watching her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. And nothing, not Roger or anyone else, could take that from me. The weeks passed in a blur of everyday life, but there was something different in the air now. Something lighter. The house, which had once felt like a shadow of what it used to be, had come alive again. The sun streamed in through the windows each morning, casting long beams of light across the floor as if to say, "This is your space now. Make it your own." And that's exactly what I did. I spent the mornings planting flowers, cleaning out the attic, and restoring the furniture my mother had left behind. It felt like I was not only reclaiming the house, but rebuilding the foundation of my own life, piece by piece. Emma seemed to settle in more and more each day. She found joy in the little things, the way the floorboards creaked beneath her feet, the way the curtains swayed in the breeze. It was almost like she could sense the transformation too, the quiet shift from a place of sadness to one of growth and renewal. She loved the backyard, which had once been my mother's pride and joy. The rose bushes were thriving, even though they hadn't been cared for in years, and the garden was beginning to feel like home again, just as it had when I was little. There was something powerful in watching Emma run through the garden, her laughter mixing with the sound of the wind rustling the leaves. It was a sound that felt like hope, like everything was going to be okay, but the shadow of Roger still loomed over me, despite the distance I had tried to put between us. He had tried to call a few times after our last conversation, but I'd ignored every call. I didn't want to hear his voice, didn't want to listen to the man who had tried to strip me of everything I held dear. And yet, I knew that eventually, the confrontation would come, whether I was ready or not. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the horizon and Emma had just gone to bed, I sat down on the old leather couch my mother had always loved. The house was quiet, too quiet. I had been expecting Roger's next move, and it felt like he was about to make it. The phone rang, breaking the silence, and I glanced at the caller ID. My stomach twisted. It was him. I took a deep breath and picked up the phone. Lucy. Roger's voice was still cool, but there was a slight tremor to it. I need to talk to you. I didn't want to talk to him. I didn't want to engage with him at all. But there was a part of me that knew I had to face this head on, once and for all, so I held my ground, keeping my voice steady. We've talked enough, Roger. There's nothing left for you to say. I know, he said, his tone softening, but I don't think you understand. I've made some mistakes, big ones, and I'm not proud of it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was this the same man who had lied to me, who had tried to take everything from me? Now he was suddenly remorseful? It felt fake, like a ploy to manipulate me once more. Roger, I said, my voice calm but firm, you've had your chance. You've had more than one. But the truth is, I can't trust you anymore, and I don't think I ever will. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him struggling to find the right words, trying to salvage something from the wreckage he had caused. But it was too late. I understand, he finally said, the words coming slowly, reluctantly. I'll never be able to undo what I did. I know that. I needed to say it. I needed you to know that I'm sorry. I didn't respond right away. What could I say? I didn't need his apology. I didn't need him to tell me what I already knew. He was sorry because it was too late to change anything, but that didn't make it right. It didn't change the fact that he had hurt me, had betrayed my mother's memory, and had tried to take what wasn't his. I appreciate you saying that, I said quietly, but words don't fix this, Roger. You don't get to walk back into my life just because you're sorry. What you took from me, what you tried to take from me, it's too much. Another silence stretched between us, longer this time. I could feel the weight of everything that had been said, everything that had been left unsaid, pressing down on me. Finally, Roger spoke, his voice tinged with something I hadn't expected, resignation. I get it, he said. You've made your decision, and maybe that's the best thing for both of us. I could hear the finality in his words, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. I was no longer the victim of his lies or manipulations. I was standing firm, not just in the house that was mine, but in my own life, my own choices. Goodbye, Roger, I said, the words steady without hesitation. Goodbye, Lucy, he replied quietly. I hung up the phone and sat there for a moment, the silence in the room somehow louder than before. But this time it wasn't oppressive. It wasn't filled with the weight of regret or unfinished business. It was a quiet peace, the kind that comes when you finally let go of something that has been holding you back. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the garden. The roses were in full bloom now, their colors vibrant against the darkening sky. Emma's laughter echoed faintly from the room next door, and for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. The storm with Roger was over, and I was finally free. Life often throws unexpected challenges our way, but how we respond to them defines who we are. One of the most important lessons I've learned is the power of reclaiming what is rightfully ours, whether it's a physical possession, a piece of our past, or our sense of self. When faced with betrayal or hardship, it's easy to feel helpless or lost. But the truth is, we hold the key to our own peace and future. Trusting our instincts, standing firm in our choices, and setting boundaries are essential in protecting what matters most to us. It's also important to remember that forgiveness doesn't mean accepting wrongdoing. It's about releasing ourselves from the grip of anger and finding freedom. And finally, don't let others dictate your path or worth. People may try to take advantage of your kindness, but you are the one who determines your value. Never settle for less than what you deserve. Life is a journey of growth, and every setback or betrayal is an opportunity to rise stronger, wiser, and more determined. Embrace your past, protect your future, and never be afraid to stand up for what is yours, because in the end, you are your own greatest ally.